Hello and welcome to Cupertino Insight. My name is Dorothy Cornelius. I'm City Clerk for the City of Cupertino and your host for this program. Recently, a group of citizens from Cupertino visited our sister city in Japan, Toyokawa. Here with me today to tell us a little bit about that trip are Mayor Plungy, the mayor of Cupertino, and Deborah Nobel, a member of the city's Architectural and Site Approval Committee. Hello, John and Deborah, and welcome to Cupertino Insight.
Hi, hello, Dorothy.
Nice of you to join us today.
Our pleasure.
First of all, John, how many people went on the trip to Toyokawa?
We had a total of 12 in our delegation. As you know, the city did not pay any of the expenses for it, so it was those of us from the council or members of the delegation who could afford to pay out of their own pockets to go. So we had a total of 12, 3 of us from the city council, our city manager, city attorney, and then people like Debbie and others from the community.
That's very nice. What other cities did you visit while you were over there?
We started by flying into Tokyo, where we spent 2 days in Tokyo, 1 full day actually, 2 evenings, and did a little touring in Tokyo, got to see we had a special tour of the Diet Building, which is the equivalent of our Congress, and so we found that to be very interesting. And then after our visit to Toyokawa, some of us went on to Hong Kong and spent some time there, and also went into mainland China for 1 day.
That must have been really exciting for you.
It was quite fascinating going into China. We saw scenes there that were reminiscent of scenes from Pearl Buck's book, The Good Earth. It didn't seem to have changed that much.
That's interesting. Since you are a mayor, I'm sure one of the things you noticed while you were over there is their system of government. What kinds of things did you find are similar to ours, if any, and what were the major differences you noticed?
I think I'd concentrate on the differences, other than they have a mayor and council elected for 4-year terms. The mayor's position there is one of quite a bit of power. Mayor Yamamoto was a city councilman for 24 years and has now served 16 years as mayor. They have a council of 35, and the city government controls almost everything. The schools, the hospitals, all of them are consolidated there, and I know they have a little difficult time trying to understand some of the differences. The fact that here in Cupertino, the school district is separate, the college is separate. So there's quite a bit of unification there. The other thing which I think would not go over too well in Cupertino is the fact that when their city council is elected, mayor and city council elected, they are then installed in office and they serve for 4 years, and they consider matters, but there are absolutely no public hearings. So the public does not have that input. The only input they have is when they elect the people, and 4 years later they make their judgment. You did a good job or you did not do a good job. So I don't think that would go over too well here in Cupertino.
I think you're right, having been employed by the city now for 7 years and having sat through many public hearings, I realize how important that public input is to this, not only the citizens but to the council as well.
Yes, very definitely. The other thing I think you might not go for either as a city employee is the fact that all city employees wear uniforms, and that was another thing that we noticed, and also the fact that when we were served tea, which is an integral part of visiting them there, it was the women who served in that position to serve the tea and things like that. So there is a difference. I think we have a little more affirmative action in the city of Cupertino.
I have no doubt, thank goodness. What I want to know is, does the city pay for their uniforms?
I really don't know. We didn't ask. I really can't say. I really can't say.
Deborah, I know that I've talked with you since you've been back, and you really had a wonderful time. Would you like to share with us some of your more memorable experiences while you were there?
That's a very difficult thing to put into a few sentences, because the whole experience in Toyokawa was that of enjoyment, awe. The people there are probably collectively the most gracious people that I have ever encountered. And the feeling of liking and welcome and hospitality was just incredible. I think if I had to say the moment at which I felt the most emotion was upon being a part of a ceremony to dedicate a room in their, what is equivalent to a community center. that was being designated entirely for the Sister City program. And after we cut the ribbon, Mayor Plungy and Mayor Yamamoto and several of the council members did that in a very nice ceremony. And as we entered this room, filled with artifacts and memorabilia from their trips here and from things that we had sent them through the years, to see our pictures there, lifelike, and the mementos and tokens. It was so touching, and I had tears in my eyes, and I know that many of the others in our delegation did too, because it was very, very flattering, very, it conveyed to me a sensitivity that I literally was not prepared for it, and we were really struck with that. So that's probably my most emotional and fulfilling moment was that experience. The people in general are a delightful group. They are very eager to do for you, to please you, to make life easier, to bring some joy, even if it's only in a cup of tea, or the way they hand you something, or the way a luncheon is prepared. It's a very interesting culture, and one that I would like to get to know better.
Well, I know that as a delegation from Cupertino, you had a very exceptional opportunity, which was to stay in homes in Toyokawa, which I'm sure enhanced the trip. Would you like to tell us a little bit about staying in a Japanese home?
Why don't you go first? We didn't stay in the same home, so
we
our experiences were a little
there were
different.
12 of us, so we were placed in 6 different homes, 2 in each home. And our particular home, Mr. and Mrs. Kugu, Mr. Kugu is a tire distributor, and it was what would consider to be a middle-class home. The other thing we found out is we were very privileged to be able to stay in a Japanese home. Generally, this is not done. I guess one of the things, first of all, is the size. Mr. Sparks and I were the two staying together. We learned to duck going through doorways to make sure things that way. The other thing, from a cultural standpoint, we knew they had one daughter and son still at home, and but the other thing was there was a second daughter who was home. Actually, she's married, but about 3 weeks before that, before we arrived, she had come home. She had been married over a year, and she was about to give birth to her first child. So she had the baby at the hospital, then came home and was going to stay at home with mother and dad until the baby was 2 months old, at which time she would return to her husband in Tokyo. And it's part of their tradition. The daughter comes home, and mother teaches her how to take care of the baby. So we got the chance to see the little baby, too, who was just a little boy. It was just darling. So that was an insight that we received.
How different from
Yes,
our culture.
Very,
Yes.
very definitely. And I would say the second thing, again, I noticed, would not be accepted, not only at City Hall, would not be accepted in my household, the role of the woman doing the cooking right there at the table. Or the other thing was they asked if we wanted some laundry to be done, so Mr. Sparks and I left some shirts and things like that. When I got back that evening, there they were, neatly ironed and all folded and the like. I brought them home in that condition to show my wife, where she informed me if I wanted them that way. I knew where the iron was and the
I love
ironing
it.
board. So at any rate, that was another thing that I noticed.
It
And
seems like an appropriate
of course,
response to me.
yes, Debbie stayed on, which we haven't mentioned, because she did visit some other places besides Toyokawa. She did not go on to Hong Kong with us, so you had some experiences
One
there.
of the interesting things that I would like to say in living with a family for an extended period of time was the amount of ritual and protocol that exists right in the home. For example, when they are serving food, they will never take from you either a cup or a glass or anything upon which you want to have refilled. You must set it on a tray first, and then they take it off the tray, refill it, put it back on the tray, and give it to you. So that I haven't figured out what the reason for that is, except that it's deeply ingrained in them, and you do not try to circumvent that ritual. And there seems to be many things about which there is a ritual that seem to be permeated through the Japanese culture, not something that was particular to our family. The different slippers that are worn in one portion of the house as opposed to wearing another type into a different, going into some of the more private rooms, you would wear something else. So that was really amazing to me, the ritual and protocol.
Okay. I see we are about to look at some slides that were taken of your trip, and perhaps you'd like to tell us what they are all about.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
Good. This is within the Toyokawa City Hall, and standing next to me are from what I can see, remember here, are the heads of their city council. The mayor, it's kind of interesting, does not preside. This was the opening banquet, a welcoming banquet that they had for us, and we felt like it was a state dinner. The audience rose as we entered the room. They were all in there ahead of time, and our delegation came in. There were speeches. We had a moment of respect, which was given to both flags. There was musical entertainment. Here we have performance on Japanese instruments. This was all within the hotel where we stayed. Here you see some of us with some of the dancers who performed for us. This was all at the opening banquet, or as they called it, a confabulation, which is a combination cocktail party, dinner, entertainment, all of those things rolled into one. And Debbie, feel free to comment here. I think this is most of our delegation with some of the members of their city council and members of the Chamber of Commerce. This was in their community center. They have a ceremonial tea room, and we went through a very ritualistic Japanese tea ceremony. We were instructed in that. The one thing we found, those of us men, we could not go back on our legs.
This here, John, is the room that I was speaking of earlier, in which all of the memorabilia and pictures and souvenirs through the years that have gone back and forth to Toyokawa, and it was just really inspiring to me.
Yeah, I would agree with Debbie. This was the most emotional point. I mean, we have everything, things we have sent them. I know some of the students in the past have visited my high school at Homestead. There are Homestead Frisbees in the case. There are copies of our local newspaper. Just amazing. This is the building from the outside, and of course, as you know, we're contemplating a community center for Cupertino. We were so impressed by that, we were kidding around with Mayor Yamamoto saying, could we have the plans for it, and it would save us engineering fees. This was delightful, visiting one of their elementary schools. We visited both an elementary school and a school for the handicapped, because Laura Lee Sorensen, who's from the school district, has an interest there. And here you can see them. They've spelled out welcome in potted plants, and they're all waving to us. We felt like kings and queens from the balcony waving there. And then we visited some of their industry. The younger people in our community might be interested. They produced the Suzuki motorcycles there, and we saw the assembly line there. They also, this is something interesting right here, right along the assembly line, a little fenced-off area for lunch facility. So the workers there can sit down and have a bite to eat. These are students who have come to Cupertino for the past 2 years. There were 12 of them, and they performed for us and did 2 little skits we found to be quite interesting. It was kind of old friends, seeing old friends. This was at a local Buddhist shrine which we visited, and the little aprons on the dolls, or the figures, represent offerings made by the people who could not afford anything else, so they put a little piece of cloth. This particular temple was 250 years old, and the pagoda next to it was 600 years old. So they build things to last there. And this particular, this is a different shrine within Toyokawa, and there over the first of the year, first, second, and third of the year, this is part of it also, some 1 million people come to the shrine.
It was my understanding that this particular shrine was somehow connected closely with business, because there were many of the fox, which is the symbol for entrepreneurship or sound and
here we have just previous to that was one of the few cherry blossoms that was still blooming, and here we have some of our people going through the ritualistic washing of the hands. And this particular display here was within a store that we visited, showing some of the dolls. This happens to be my host and hostess, Mr. and Mrs. Kugu, and this was at the farewell banquet that we had. Mr. Sparks with Mayor Yamamoto, and this was again Japanese entertainment. We had dancers, we had geisha, we had the drummers who were young men from the equivalent of their army. They called them the National Defense Force, and they were just excellent, performed very, very well. So all in all, it was just a tremendous, tremendous visit.
That was really delightful. And I want to thank both of you, Deborah and John, for sharing those experiences with us.
Well, thank you very much, and we hope that more people from Cupertino will be able to go over there and share those experiences.
I
would hope so. I would hope that something would come of that, for this show, if it inspired someone to go and have the memories that I will have forever.
And I would
precious to me.
Have one thing for our audience: if there are any people who are contemplating going, to contact us ahead of time so we will know and can make arrangements for them, at least to meet some of the people there.
Right, very good. Maybe those who didn't go this time will go next time.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
On May 11th, the Cupertino citizens participated in Walk a Golden Mile, an event held every year to raise money for the senior services in our community. This year, nearly 40 seniors walked the mile around Memorial Park. Countless others contributed both their time and money towards helping with lunch.
I'm so pleased. We've just finished our Walk a Golden Mile and had a few stragglers, but we all made it and we're so pleased. And our motto is, and always has been, seniors helping seniors. And this is our 7th annual walk, and I'm going to read a little bit of this because it helps me remember. But the first 2 years of the walk, we raised money to buy furniture and equipment for the senior center that was to be built. And the following 2 years, in fact, we worked to help get the senior daycare center established. And the daycare center is on the corner of Stelling and McClellan, and their goal is to keep seniors from being institutionalized. In other words, the frail elderly can go there for a few hours a day and really help. It really helps their family and is also good for the seniors. So we raise money for them. The following year, we raised money to purchase smoke alarms for seniors who live alone and couldn't afford smoke alarms, and the fire department then volunteered to install them free for us. So we've been raising money for that. Last year, we raised over $3,000 to benefit the Senior Emergency Assistance Fund because so many social programs have been cut back, and this was a way that our case manager, social worker, could raise money to help people. And so that was great. And when I'm talking about frail and vulnerable elderly people with the Senior Emergency Fund, I'm talking about crisis situations where if it's on a Friday at 5 o'clock, Nancy can help get them through the weekend until a social agency or whatever can take over. So then again this year now, we are going to raise money for that fund. We are going to again help the daycare center, and then we are making a survey of other Cupertino senior area needs. And one of the things that I want to say is I'm so proud of the support that we have gotten from the community and from the many, many merchants, plus the individual seniors. Home Savings donated $350 to help us with lunch expenses, and with the balance then going to the fund. Long's Drug is going to be selling hot dogs and Coca-Cola for 50 cents over the weekend, with all of the funds coming to aid the Walk a Golden Mile. So it's just, I am pleased and proud of these people, seniors helping seniors.
The walk was a great success. At last count, nearly $3,000 had been raised by and for the senior community. With me now to discuss the city's Architectural and Site Approval Committee is Roger Higdon, chairperson of that committee. Hello, Roger, and welcome to Cupertino Insight.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you for joining me today. First of all, what is ASAC, and why are they important to the city of Cupertino?
Well, ASAC stands for Architectural and Site Approval Committee. It's a committee of 5 members that meets twice a month to review basically the new developments proposed in the city. We review the site plans, the building architecture, landscaping, and then we also review all signs that are proposed for the city, both for new and for existing buildings.
When your committee reviews an application, what are the kinds of things you look for?
The basic work that our committee does is to see that the proposed new development will be in harmony with the neighborhood. We have a lot of areas in Cupertino where there's a drastic change between, say, Stevens Creek, where there's a high development of commercial or industrial buildings, right adjacent to the residential area. We want to make sure that the new projects that are going in will fit with the neighborhood and not cause any particular major problems, whether it's traffic problems, light glare from the lighting, or just intrusions of sight from an office building into a residential backyard.
I know that currently there is an office building going up on De Anza Boulevard, and I also know that ASAC reviewed the plans for that building several times before you recommended it for approval. Could you please tell us some of the kinds of changes that were made because of ASAC's review and your recommendations?
And first, I think it's important to say that our committee doesn't actually design a project. We're a reviewing group that gives input to the project's owners and architects. We have 2 architects, and I, as a civil engineer on the committee, have a lot of expertise in project design. But our main purpose is to help those that are designing the project and are probably more concerned with the function of their project and their costs, help them see the community value of what they're doing. The particular project that we reviewed is on De Anza Boulevard. Went through several processes. Our committee's more of an informal review in the beginning, where we try to work with the architect, the owner, landscape architects to develop certain ideas. And it's a working project. The first plans that were submitted for this particular project, for instance, showed a very plain building, more of an industrial type, with a very sharp corner in the direction of traffic along De Anza Boulevard. The suggestions of the committee asked the architect to look into both adding more interest to the building so that it looked more like the adjoining commercial property along the way, and softening that particular corner. And I think out of the project development, that was essentially accomplished by the architect. Another concern is, I think you've noticed on a lot of buildings in other cities, there's equipment on tops of the roofs. Our concern is that this not be visible to the neighbors or to the public in general. And on the particular building, the first plans didn't show how the architect was going to accomplish this. So we asked him to come back later with some plans to show how he would actually hide the roof equipment.
Isn't that essentially usually air conditioning type equipment, that kind of thing?
Air conditioning, and now we're finding a lot of, for instance, transmission type screens, and since Cupertino is so much involved in high technology, we're getting a lot of other things placed on roofs rather than just the air conditioning
I
units.
see. Okay. Did you have any other problems with that particular original design, or questions about it?
We had quite a few questions too about the circulation on the property, how the people would get
Traffic
off
circulation.
of traffic
Okay.
circulation. And we also look at pedestrian circulation too. And both how people get from the public sidewalk into a building, whether the building offers an entrance that will encourage pedestrian use. And being on Deanza or buildings on Stevens Creek, it's very important that the cars get in and out of the major thoroughfare and be able to operate within the site. We also try to encourage property owners to cooperate and combine their parking lots so that you can go from one parking lot to another and out on a side street rather than using Deanza or Stevens Creek.
I have to share this with you because we call it reciprocal ingress-egress, and I think that's I always laugh when I hear that term, but when I use that access, I always appreciate that it's there, really and truly. Roger, once ASAC approves an application, what happens to it? Where does it go from there?
Basically, ASAC is more of an informal exchange of ideas. And then when we feel that a project will be in harmony with the neighborhood and that the architect and owners have considered all the factors, we then make a recommendation to the City Council that the project be approved. The Council then either has a formal hearing or oftentimes approves the projects on the basis of the site plan and architectural per the city recommendations. We also have the final review in the new signs. Anything, though, that the committee takes a final review can be appealed to the City Council, and the owner can have another hearing on it. All of our meetings are open to the public, and we encourage neighbors to come in and give us their ideas. Several times, a new apartment project, for instance, built next to your home, you'd have some concerns. And we ask that the people come in and tell us what it's like in their backyard and what their concerns are so that we can pass that on to the designer so that they have the privacy that they deserve.
I think that's great. And since you have mentioned the public is invited to the meetings, they need to know it's the second and fourth Monday
That's right,
of
7
every
o'clock.
month. Excellent. 7 o'clock in the City Hall conference room. Roger, thank you very much for being here today. I really appreciate your taking the time and telling us a little bit about it, ASAC.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you. We all know that Cupertino has a traffic problem. In 1978, the City Council authorized the installation of a computerized signal system in hopes that would alleviate the long delays during the AM and PM peak traffic hours. Last week, Glenn Grigg, the city traffic engineer, spent some time with us to describe how the system works and to give us a performance update.
The Interconnect System that we have here, and Interconnect Systems in general, are designed to control the traffic signals and to control the interval of time between the green lights from intersection to intersection. The purpose of that is to primarily get the through traffic moving in the direction of the peak hour traffic, in the peak flow direction, and minimize the number of stops that the motorists have to make. It also controls the amount of green time that is allowed for all of the movements that enter the intersection.
So what does that mean?
Simple interconnected systems, like what we see in San Francisco as an example. 19th Avenue, Gough Street, Franklin, are what we call two-phase intersections. That is, it's green for 19th Avenue, and when it's not green for 19th Avenue, it's green for the cross street. There's only two particular movements to handle. Those systems are fairly easy to control and easy to accommodate the through traffic. When we get down here in Santa Clara Valley, you see a lot of protected left turn signals, pedestrian crossings, walk and don't walk signals, and multiple phase, or you'll see protected left turns all the way around the intersection. These intersections are more difficult to coordinate one to the other because the amount of green time that's allocated to the arterial is reduced by the amount of green time that's required to service all of these other movements. And the pedestrian timing makes that even more complicated. So in those cases, we use the microcomputer, which this machine here has, to help us allocate those green times and to control when the arterial greens occur. We also use other machinery like this microprocessor to help us optimize those programs, make them better, make them work more efficiently, and then we input the data that we get from this micro into the master controller, and the interconnect then allocates the time and sets up the greens. We have a lot of traffic to handle. The best way to handle the traffic is to keep it moving. If it stops, then it builds up and it compounds the congestion. And congestion is not only the number of cars that you see on the road, but how long they're there. And if they're stopped at intersections down the road, then their travel time is longer, and those cars are in Cupertino for a longer period of time, and the congestion level is higher. Even though the volumes may be the same, the congestion and the perceived congestion is higher, and the level of service, the operating level of the intersections go down. We're controlling Ganza Boulevard, Stevens Creek Boulevard, and Wolf Road, and the two signals on Stelling Road. Primarily, we're trying to move those cars north and south, and we're trying to accommodate Stevens Creek Boulevard as well as we can to reduce congestion along there.
Although the system has been successful in reducing delays, residents still have some questions and complaints.
Probably the most popular complaint about a traffic signal is if the green is too short to clear everybody who is waiting. The left turns are where we get the most complaints. They have to wait a long time and then it doesn't clear. And those situations we can handle right from the basement. We can come here to the machine and make the changes necessary. The information is sent out of the basement through that cable with a direct hookup to the intersections, and we can make timing changes at any of the intersections that are online from here without leaving the room. And then we can go back and monitor that particular intersection to see if we have made an effect or whether we have allocated too much green time or not enough. We generally put too much green time on, we monitor the intersection, and then back it down to what's reasonable. And that takes care of the complaint pretty well. As far as the complaints are concerned, that's kind of what we see the most of. the misunderstandings. A lot of people don't understand the why we change the phase sequences. We do that through the interconnect. Those phase sequences are recommended by our optimization program. The computer looks at different phase sequencing in order to get the maximum through band or through traffic through the intersection. The standard sequence of events would be the protected left turns come up first, and then it will go to one of the protected left turns and a through, depending upon the number of cars that are there. And then it goes to the through traffic, and then it'll go to the side street. That's the normal or standard phase sequence of operation. The computer, the interconnect computer, has the ability to change that sequence. So you'll see one left turn come up with a through movement. Then it will go to the through movements, and then it will come back to the other through and that other left turn before it goes to the cross street. Or in some cases, the through movements come first, then the left turns, and then it goes to the cross street. And there are some other sequences that we can have, but that's a general idea of what I mean by changed phase sequences. And we do that to better accommodate the through traffic. Interconnect systems themselves benefit the motoring public, reducing stops, fuel consumption in particular. Air pollution, that's a whole other issue, one that's a little harder to measure, especially for the individual. But automobile maintenance costs go down, gasoline bills go down if you don't have to stop. You put wear and tear on the brakes, you start up, you put wear and tear on the transmission, tires, fuel, motor oil, all of those things suffer from stops and starts. So we're saving the motorist real money, real cash money out of the pocket. And a great deal of the motorists on our streets are our own citizens. So in that regard, it certainly is appropriate to spend city money, which is really their money anyway, to save them money and time.
Thanks for watching Cupertino Insight. See you again in 2 weeks.